It's kind of sewed like this, but you can get these nice funky little caps, which are basically like felt tip markers. You can also get the pens that you can load up. And what you want to think about this stuff is acrylic paint, but it's like ink-like or even water-like consistency. So it allows you really to flow. It was designed to replace their airbrush line. It's actually better than their airbrush line. I always found their airbrush line to be a little sticky side. I mean, it was a good product, but it just had some issues, which I think is why. And this you can put through an airbrush. You can basically put it through anything that you would use inks for. Inks are problematic because inks are organic. They're going to change. So if you're using colored inks, you may want to think about that. It will change. What's cool about these is that, like I said, they sell these little felt tip markers. Word of warning, make sure the lid is closed. It will go all over the place. There's a little ball bearing in there, little marbles, and it's designed, why? Because there's so many binders in here, there's so many retarders in here, that there's a different weight factor. All the pigment's going to drop down to the bottom. You may get customers that say, like, it's not coming out right. You want to make sure that they're shaking it and that they hear the marble. Because if not, then it's not being mixed up properly. And I've found that at times, if it's sitting on the shelf for a long time, you actually need to go in there with a little stick, a tip of a brush, and break it up. Get it moving.
That's what I did.
And then it's fine. So that's something to tell your customers. Other than that, if you use them all the time, they stay pretty happy. Okay, I'm not going to use that one. Sometimes I find that these lids also, the felts come off. Perfect example. Yeah. Okay. Also, if you don't use the felt tips a lot, they will dry out. But very ink-like consistency, but acrylic paint. Fun colors. What I really like is I used to go through so much trouble of thinning down acrylic paint and then painting it, and then they Golden sent me this. And so now I can sign the back of my paintings with these. Much more control, and unlike a Sharpie, it will stay that way. It won't change. There's more small too. There it is. And they have it in different sizes. I noticed you have a bunch, so that's kind of fun to play with. Nice little starter sets too. The next thing we're going to talk about is, as I said, you can really just pour it out. Fun little things you can play with. So as I said, you can make acrylic paint look like watercolor. But Golden did come out a few years ago with a whole line of watercolors called Core. It's a cute little names. I actually started using it. I mentioned I work all on aluminum, and I actually am now probably one of the only people in the world who's doing large-scale watercolors on aluminum composite panel. The largest one I've done is 4 by 8 feet. Frees you up, allows you to not to have to be under glass. But this is actually, a lot of people, I've been talking all along about, basically some different form of acrylic paint. This is actual watercolor. What they did was they invented a new binder. It's called Aquasol. Doesn't really matter if you remember it or not, but it's a different binder in comparison to gum arabic, which has been around for like 200 years or even more. Matter of fact, Golden advertises the first major improvement to watercolor in 150 years. And it's really kind of cool because traditional gum arabic has a couple of drawbacks, meaning if you go too thick with your watercolor and it's on paper and you go like this, it'll crack. It's very brittle. Right? Probably the best thing, this is much more flexible, but I think the best thing is because of the nature of the binder, it allows for a much higher pigment load. So the colors are very, very intense. And as I said, it is a watercolor, and I did this little sphere, and then I worked back into it with the lift, you know, to pick it up and to do some blending. A lot of really cool colors. And probably the neatest thing, and one thing I'm using here, are some of the grounds that they've developed. There's 3 different grounds. One is called cold press ground, which basically looks like cold press or handmade paper. The one that I use has a very exciting name of watercolor ground. And this sort of like kind of imitates more hot press paper. And then there's light dimensional grounds. I don't know where they come up with these names. And this just allows you to build up a lot more of the texture. We all know what grounds are, right? Can we talk about grounds a bit? You know, traditional ground is a gesso. That white stuff that we buy, it's not really gesso. Proper term for that white stuff is acrylic dispersion ground. But if we sold it here for that, no one would buy it because no one would know what it is. Traditional gesso was a 2-stage process where you would take animal hide glue or fish glue, whatever, and you size the canvas with that or wood panel, and then you would take some kind of whiting, usually lead, and you put that on. So it was a 2-stage process. There were a lot of issues between being, for safety issues and also brittleness of it. So the gesso that they sell as gallons of the white stuff is actually really good. Think about, gesso is like the foundation of your house. You always want to use a good quality. I have a lot of students asking me, can I use, primer, house paint primer that I can get at a hardware store? And yeah, in theory you can, but it's not designed for the same. All right? Gesso, good grounds need to have a little bit of a tooth. It needs to be somewhat absorbent, but not overly absorbent. Somewhat absorbent so it holds the paint, but not enough where all the expensive stuff is going to go into your surface. You have to keep recoating. So that's it. These are different grounds. They allow you to do different things. Like I said, I work on aluminum. I usually do acrylic paintings, and lately I've been doing a lot of water aluminum. And this is like treated, it's a pain in the butt, but it just allows you to. That's what a lot of these grounds do. It allows you to be freer as far as what to work on. So I'm not working on paper, and it's treated so it doesn't ever have to be under glass, which I like, because it's really something to see large scale watercolors that are not under glass. And then it also does really annoy the traditional watercolors. Now, what's cool about Core is that you can really open up the medium a lot. Because the colors are so strong, you can do different kinds of printing. These are just like monoprints, where basically what I did was I did this little abstract shape. I made the paper, I let it dry, I made the paper wet, and then I put the wet paper onto it, and I got a print. And I got a ghost print. And you can also get, and this too is just monoprinting done with the Core. Once again, the paper was wet, but you could really see, like, first of all, how intense some of the colors are. So think about that, you want to be able to think about how much you could really open up the technique. And a lot of people think of watercolor in a very, very kind of traditional sense, but it can be used for printing, and why not? Look at the detail here. Once again, this is just like I just trickled out the paint, let it dry, and then I printed from that. Or a lot of people stencils are kind of in. So here is, I have to remember how I did this now. Okay, so this is a piece done with a stencil, and how I did it was I laid the stencil down, which is this. I did this sort of like abstract watercolor. I laid the stencil on the dry watercolor, the Core, and then I sprayed it with an archival varnish. Then I removed the stencil and then ran that under water. So all the pale colors have been lifted off. So once again, you can open it up. And the whole idea with these products, and one thing Golden really likes to push, is to get a lot of good energy of experimentation. We don't have to think outside the box. You have those days where everything is dead, nothing's going, and you want to try something different, try really pushing it. And once again, I think you can also see how intense these colors are. You would not normally think of this as a watercolor. And then this was kind of cool, I guess. Once again, just playing around. But this is actually a painting on the reverse side. The reverse side was treated. What did I treat it with? Oh, with ground for paint. So it's done on the reverse side, and then basically through that I did the painting of these onions, and so this side's kind of protected.
But you put the ground and then you paint?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how I did this. Because that doesn't really make sense, but that's what it says.